starts, we'll get going. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful Saturday evening, Sunday morning in some places, as our friend can attest on the panel tonight. And welcome to another edition of Mind of an Atheist. As always, I am Jeremiah from No God, No Peace, No God, No UAA. Joining me tonight is a wonderful panel to help discuss Genesis, but before we get into that, let's meet them. Starting from left to right, we have my good friend, also from No God, No Peace, Brandon, a good longtime friend of the show. Brandon, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, my name's Brandon. I work for a living. That's really pretty much all my life is about at the moment. I help run a few pages, No God, No Peace, even though I haven't posted anything there in forever. And same with Rationally Thinking and Honest Humanist. I also help out on that page. Mostly known for my posts to people and whatnot, my comments, I guess I should say, instead of any posts I actually make. I feel I do much better responding to people than actually making original content than anything. So that's pretty much what I do. I troll people, I guess.
All right, up next we have Dio. Dio, you've been on the show a couple of times, but I want to give you the opportunity to plug yourself and your book, so go ahead, buddy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Diogenes Mayberry. I wrote the book Manifest Insanity. It's a satirical history of Judeo-Christian doctrines, and about 3-4 weeks ago I was able to get it listed on the Richard Dawkins Foundation, the Reason and Science Foundation. So that was a big coup.
Yeah, that is quite a good good accomplishment. Dio, if I get you to plug in a pair of headphones, that would be great because I'm getting a little bit of an echo on your side. So. Meanwhile, we also have good friend of the show, Mike Sherlock, who runs a whole bunch of different pages and has a book series in the works. So I want to give Michael the opportunity to talk about everything that he does. So Michael, it's good to see you, and tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jeremiah. Well, yeah, as you said, yeah, I've authored a 3-volume series, and the first volume is out now. It's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's called I Am Christ, The Crucifixion, Painful Truths. The second volume, I Am Christ, The Resurrection, is at the moment with the editor, and that should be out in a month or so. And then the third volume will be out next year. And I've also written another 2 books that will probably come out next year simultaneously, or one will anyway. So yeah, I enjoy writing, I enjoy reading. I'm running Sherlock's House of Atheism and Heresy on Facebook, and that's not doing too bad. And also I'm doing a YouTube series called Let's Tear Up the Bible, and another YouTube series called Let's Tear Up the Quran. And so I have fun tearing up pages on YouTube there. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. That's me.
Your YouTube series was actually one of the big reasons I was looking forward to having you on the show tonight, because I know this is kind of your hobby, if you will, doing stuff like this particular episode tonight. So it's good to see you again. And of course, I am Jeremiah from No God, No Peace, No God, No Peace, and UAA. UAA, United Atheists of America, is a pretty big page. It's about, we're closing in on 60,000 people, so I'm excited about that. That is now under new management. Friend of the show, Ryan, is one of the lead owners of that page now, so that's very awesome for Ryan. We're really want to congratulate him on that. Alternatively, No God, No Peace, No God, No Peace is my page. We're closing in on 2,000, so we're nowhere near the other one, but we're dedicated to doing 4 things. No God is demonstrating the foolishness of faith. No Peace, N.O., is dedicated to showing the harm of religious faith and the dangers of religious extremism. No God, N.O., is atheist humor, memes, satire, whatever else we think is appropriate. And No Peace, K-N-O-W, is dedicated to showing secular morality and proving that atheists do in fact have morals, despite the well, I won't say a common belief, but a unfortunate misconception that exists within a large group of people. So, with introductions out of the way, I just have a couple of quick announcements to make before we get started. The first one is, of course, we want to let you know that we do now have a subreddit on reddit.com. If you go to www.reddit.com/r/mindofanetheist, one word, slash, you can find the Mind of an Atheist subreddit, where we post all kinds of things, including our episodes, and just little things that we find along the way. So if you haven't done that, please go to the subreddit and subscribe. If you've never been on Reddit, I really encourage you to. It's a great place. We also want to encourage you to go to the Mind of an Atheist Facebook and give that a like, as we do post a lot of things on that, including things from previous episodes. We also encourage you to follow all of the pages of our panels tonight, and as well as the pages of people who are not on the panel tonight, because we think that they deserve that. So, one final announcement is we are looking to add people to the show. I made this announcement on the last episode, which was 2 weeks ago, and I think we may have gotten some people who just went to the group and suggested a request, but the way I would prefer that you do it is go to the Mind of an Atheist Facebook page, send us your name, any pages that you've run, any work you've done in the past, and an explanation as to why you think you'd make a good member of our panel. No previous experience is required, but it is smiled upon if you have it. So that's the last announcement I wanted to make. So unless anybody else has anything they want to say, let's get into tearing apart Genesis, which is something I have wanted to do for a long time. So I will give our panel an opportunity to say anything they want to say before we get going, and then we'll get underway. So panel, anything you want to add?
Looking forward to it as well.
Okay.
Indeed.
Well then, I will remind everybody that once again the philosophy of the show, once again, ladies and gentlemen, as it has always been, is that this is a show that encourages you to come to your own conclusions. We're here to provide you an argument. We're here to provide you evidence for that argument. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it's up to you to follow the road, follow the evidence, and make the decisions yourself. If you end up agreeing with us, awesome, we're glad to have you. If not, that's okay too. So, with that in mind, folks, let's get into it. The book of Genesis, the first book in the Bible, the book that describes the creation of the world, creation of humanity, the destruction of humanity, and a lot of crazy antics that come along the way, including child sacrifice and much more. Who in the world of 2013 could believe that the earth was created in 4 days, that two people populated the entire world, that they were manipulated by a serpent to change their minds about obeying their creator, that a flood that lasted 40 days destroyed most of the earth except for two of all the animals and 8 people? Well, you'd actually be quite surprised at the lunacy that exists in this world today when it comes to Genesis. Tonight we are going to dissect some of the most famous stories from that book, including Adam and Eve, the creation myth itself, the Great Flood, the story of Abraham, and much, much more. There is potential that this might bleed into a Part 2 episode next week, so if you enjoy what you see this week, we hope you stop by. Now, before we do anything, I want to give the panel the opportunity to pick the stories we go through first, because as the host, I want to reflect that onto you guys. So, Michael, Dio, Brandon, is there any particular story you guys would like to start with?
We could start at the beginning, Genesis 1.
Indeed, we could.
Okay. If you guys want to go in order, that's fine with me. It's okay. So go ahead. Anybody who wants to jump in on Genesis 1, Brandon. If I'm not mistaken, Brandon, you have all of the books of Genesis pulled up. If you want to, go ahead and read a little bit of it to us. That would be great.
Okay. I could definitely do that. So we have the book of Genesis, chapter 1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. By the way, at any point when I'm reading, if any of you guys want to have me stop, that way you can, take a moment,
yes,
dissect some of what's being said, go right ahead, interrupt me.
Well, then before you continue, I'd just like to point out the obvious notion that with this the subjected idea that God created the world. So we have to keep in mind we're dealing in that spectrum, if it wasn't obvious already.
Okay, can I interrupt?
Go right ahead.
Because there's already a mistranslation, and it exists in almost every Bible, except the NRSV Bible, which was edited, the senior editor was Bruce Metzger. Yeah, there's already a mistranslation. The Hebrew was originally Bereshit bara Elohim, and Elohim is the gods. So in the beginning, the gods created. And now there's a lot of apologies for this plural term, the gods created the earth, the heavens and the earth. But the actual fact of the matter is that Judaism used to be a polytheistic religion. It ended up selecting one god out of the many, or a kind of mishmash of one god out of the many. But Elohim was the depiction, and it's a word that's used to describe the gods, a multiple of gods. And so you have that theme, and that's a big mistranslation, and that's one of the reasons I don't know if you can see that. I tore that page out.
Kind of.
Yeah, so I've got lots of pages of Genesis floating around here. I've got another one here. And, yeah, I've got pages. I got like a little, this bit. So anyway, yeah. So the Elohim, that's one of the big mistranslations in the beginning, and the whole myth is that Judaism and Christianity are based on a monotheistic tradition, and that Judaism founded the monotheistic tradition. When we see monotheism in Egypt prior to the birth of Judaism, and we see monotheism in the ancient Greek religions as well. But yeah, the Elohim, the gods created. This is, there's a lot of apologies for it, and I don't know, maybe Dio's familiar with some of the apologies that are given as to why Christians claim that even though it's the gods, it's only one God. They're ridiculous apologies, especially when you start taking apart the text. But yeah, that's the first mistranslation I'd like to pull up and let anyone else talk now.
Fair enough.
I agree with you that it was very much polytheistic religion for quite a long time. It was only up until Josiah in 622 BC that they really finally cracked down to make it a monotheistic religion. But yeah, you're right. It was very much throughout most of its early history very polytheistic. So
isn't it very interesting that the very first line of most modern Bibles bases the rest of the book on what could be what is a horrible mistranslation and misrepresentation of the situation at hand. Isn't it quite interesting that for the rest of this book that we're going to go into, we are dealing with what is wrong. We are dealing with one God when it was really many gods, and the entire religion has been based on this one God. But now, how are we to take the rest of this at face value if the very first sentence has a huge question mark? That should be a red flag to anyone.
My theory is that it wasn't a mistake because the Genesis 1 story was ripped off word for word from the Sumerian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. And both Genesis 1 and the Enuma Elish track word for word. They both start off with this formless void, and then on day 1, God creates the heavens and the earth, and then it makes the exact same mistake, creates the stars on day 4. So how do we get light on day 1 if stars aren't around for day 4? So the gods probably came from the Enuma Elish.
Yeah, and not just that, but also if you read through the Enuma Elish and the other Sumerian texts and the other Babylonian texts that were discovered by Layard just opposite Mosul in the ancient city of Nineveh, they pulled up about 20,000 clay tablets there in the 19th century. If you look through that, George Smith in his book, The Chaldean Account of the Genesis, he goes through and he shows you with the tablets, okay, well day 1's accounted for in the Sumerian text, day 2, day 3, they're in exactly the same order. You have in the Sumerian text as well that the gods are pronouncing it was good in the same way that the Bible does, but only before the act of creation, not after the act of creation. You have all, like you said, that same error that occurs in the Bible is in there as well. And this is what I say in the second volume of my series, that, well, the predominant difference between the ancient Babylonian religion, Sumerian religion, and the later Hebrew one is that the Hebrew one is monotheistic and the former is polytheistic. But when you look at it, there's not even that difference. And like you said, it's not a mistake. It's an actual, it's a rip-off. And when you start looking at the text historically and textually, you start seeing that the majority of Genesis, at least, was written in the post-exilic period. That is, after the Jews were exiled in Babylon. and this is attested to by most archaeological scholars and biblical scholars now are coming to terms with it. You can pick up the Oxford Bible Commentary and other primary reference texts, and they'll tell you that, okay, most of Genesis was written after the Jews had been in Babylon. Okay, so well, here's a coincidence. They've got all the same myths. These myths were written just after they were in contact with these people. Mesopotamia was a massive influence in the region. Judea was just a fly on the wall, basically. They were nothing politically. They were always someone's servant or slave, which is probably why the texts are so violent and rebellious. But so it's. I don't think it's a coincidence that you have this rip-off, straight after the time that they've come out of Babylon.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, one thing before we go on, I did want to remind the audience that's watching today that you can participate on this show. I can't believe I forgot to announce this. You can actually participate on the show by leaving comments in a YouTube feed, and we, the panel, can see them as they come. So if you have anything you'd like to add, if you think the panel member might be mistaken, or if you'd like to do the other thing and compliment somebody, or whatever you want to do, we can see it as you do it. So go ahead and participate that way. So now that that's been said, let's go on, Brandon. Let's hear what else we've got.
Well, before I continue, I just want to say if it keeps going on like this, we may need 5 parts to just this one, because that was just the first sentence.
You're right.
Anyway, so where did I leave off?
Right.
Okay. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. I think we'll just skip the part of that part, just because we kind of went over it a little bit about Him creating light and on whatnot and the stars the next day. All right. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." Okay. It's like really.
Well, science has established that, hasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it has.
When they went up to the moon, they were just swamped with water.
Right.
Exactly.
Weren't they?
Yeah. Neil was swimming around.
The fact that they built a summer home. Yes. All right, go ahead, Brandon.
So God made the dome and separated the waters from where under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, and it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together He called seas. And God said it was good. But then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed and fruit trees of every kind on earth to bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so.
Well, I'd like to stop you there, because we're going to also, I take it, get into He creates animals and creates them, and it was good, and etc. Well, we can take a look through the genetic materials of both plants and animals and see that there have been millions of years of diversity and change over the course of existence of life. That section of the book of Genesis suggests that these creatures, plant and animal, were created in their state as they exist today, and the Bible will go on in other books to continue that idea that they exist in the state that they were created in today. But we can see very much that this is not the case. If you go back through the genetic material contained in both plants and animals, there's a long chain of history that suggests, and very strongly, might I add, to the point where it is considered fact, that there has been so much diversity and change throughout the history of time that for the record, it is a non-fact to say that everything is in the state that it was created in. It is downright lie to say that everything is now as it was then. We have had such diversity through evolution and through cross-pollination that we are looking at today. If we go outside and look at the world today, we are seeing much different vegetation and animal life than we would have seen 10 million years ago, 20 million years ago, 100 million years ago, however far you want to go back in the chain of life. So I want to disprove this segment right now that plants and animals were created and they were good, and that was that.
Well, for sure, the molecular DNA that scientists have found. Trees have DNA, plants have DNA, and it's the same DNA that we have in our bodies. It's just
right.
Different genes are coded for different things. The DNA is the same.
Exactly. Anybody else on this? If anybody out there in the audience, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
So yeah, I was just going to say, I just like to add one little thing that whenever science comes up and disproves a statement in the Bible, you'll find that one of the rationalizations believers make is they jump from literal to figurative. They say, oh, okay, well, that part's figurative now, because now we understand that it's rubbish. So that part's figurative, but the rest is fine. The rest is literal. And it just seems like science is just slowly eroding the Bible and turning it into what it really is and putting it in its place, which is it's a fiction. You know, it's a fiction, let's be honest.
And while we're on the subject of people taking ideas and saying, well, this part's fact, but this is a story. This is trying to tell us something. For the record, who is to decide? This is supposedly a holy book that came directly from the Creator himself. That's the supposition. So, who is on earth is to decide which parts of the book that supposedly came from the one true God? Who's to decide that this part's fake but this part's true? We're supposed to do this, but we're not supposed to do that. But we're allowed to do this, but we're not allowed to do that. I don't believe that if for the sake of argument, if this book was supposedly holy and it was holy, and it came from the being that it supposedly came from, I don't believe that there's any person on earth that would be able to make a decision as to what parts we're supposed to keep and what parts we're not.
Well, if you listen to...
Just to put that out there.
Yeah, if you listen to some of the theologians, like John Calvin himself, I quoted him in my book, the creation story itself, he calls the creation story divine baby talk. I mean, he uses the word baby talk, that this story is a parable to help simple-minded humans, his followers most likely, understand how does someone as divine, a creature that we can't even comprehend, create something as grand, as magnificent as the universe. So when the leading theologian of the Calvinist churches tells you it's baby talk, then why do the people in his churches, why are they the ones in his denominations? Are they the ones that are pushing this literal agenda? It just boggles the mind.
Right. Mm-hmm. And before we get back to reading any more of Genesis, I would like to invite our audience that if anyone, because we were talking about evolution briefly, if anyone in the audience is skeptical or has questions about evolution, I encourage you to go to a website called talkorigins.org. It is a great website full of information about evolution. It also has frequently asked questions so that some of the questions you might have can be answered, and it has a very expansive, detailed collection of evidence and support for evolution. So talkorigins.org. I will try to remember to put a link to it in the video description after the fact. But anyways, unless anybody else has anything to say about this, Brandon, you can continue.
All right, where did I leave off? Okay. Here we go. The part where we talked about the lights. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars.
We did kind of about this, but we know now, obviously, that the moon is not a light, and I mean, the sun is not itself just a strange body of light. It is a star. It is more than just like some strange light force in the sky, and the moon is obviously an astrological body rather than once again just I mean, we can very easily, even Christians will acknowledge that the moon is not a light. So, even they're at the point where they're like, well, okay, we got it.
Then to continue.
All right, Brandon.
God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. I feel like I'm reading like Nevermore.
Once again. Yeah. Well. The sun and the moon are not in our sky. We are bodies that exist in the galaxy that we are in, and the sun is really the center. We rotate around it with the moon orbiting us. But yeah, the sun is not part of our sky. We see it because it is within visible range. But it is to say that it's like in a dome that is contained around Earth is a fallacy. Obviously.
Yeah. And linking what you're saying now back to what Dio said earlier about Calvin's statement about the baby talk, divine baby talk. I mean, the fathers in the Alexandrian school of Christianity, the early fathers like Origen and Clement of Alexandria, they all knew this. They all admitted this freely. Like I could quote Origen now. he said, could any man of sound judgment suppose that the first, second, and third days of creation had an evening and a morning when there was yet no sun or moon or stars? Could anyone be so unintelligent as to think that God made a paradise somewhere in the east and planted it with trees like a farmer, or that in that paradise he put a tree of life, a tree that you could see and know with your senses, a tree that you could derive life from by eating its fruit with the teeth in your head? When the Bible says that God used to walk in paradise in the evening, or that Adam hid behind a tree, no one, I think, will question that these are only fictions. And that's coming from Origen, one of the founding fathers of Christianity. You know, he's the person who introduced the sermon into the worship service. He was deemed anathema. That is, he was persecuted after his death by the church because of some of the things he said like this. But he was one of the founding fathers of Christianity, and he's telling you this. And not only that, you have ancient, Jews as well, like Rabbi Moses Maimonides, who was a very prominent Jew, and he wrote the 12 doctrines, or it's along those lines anyway. He said as well that this is just fiction. This Genesis is fiction. And so, yeah.
If I can quote, I've got from the Jewish Encyclopedia, I've got the Maimonidean description of allegory. This is the fundamental proposition of these allegorists was then formulated to the effect that all the narrative portions of Scripture, especially from those of the initial verse of Genesis down to Exodus chapter 20, verse 2, are not to be taken literally. From creation to Revelation, all is parable. And this is right out of the Jewish Encyclopedia. I mean, the people who wrote, who borrowed and incorporated this story are telling you it's a parable.
Yeah. All right, and if it's fiction, then we need to ask the next question. All right, where does it come from? And Dio, you already mentioned that. It comes from Samaria. It's natural. When you look at it anthropologically, a big influential state like Mesopotamia has an impact culturally on those that are subject to it. The same way that the Egyptian myths, you'll find them in Genesis and in Exodus as well. You'll find them in there because these big nations had influence. It's like today. You look at Bollywood in India, for example, and you'll see many repeated themes from Hollywood. Hollywood movies remade into Bollywood movies. That's because America is a giant in the industry of movie making, and it's a cultural it's a cultural empire, so to speak. And so you'll find that, and this is what we have in ancient myth as well. I mean, it's movie making is myth.
Yes. And that's a very good point. You have to know where fictions come from to understand why they're fictions. It's a very good point. So, did anybody else have anything on this, or should we continue? Because I think we're a couple of paragraphs into this, and we've already established that the people who wrote it are like, "Hey, man, this is don't take this seriously." So, but if anybody else has anything
of chapter 1.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Brandon, and keep us going.
All right. Okay, so, and God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky. So God created the great sea monsters.
Can I just interrupt
right there on purpose.
real quick? Can I just interrupt real quick and say that this supposed dome would have created quite the difficult problem for our space program. This idea of everything being domed in a sense, whether or not you're taking that literally, which we've established, that dome would have created quite a difficult scenario for our space program to figure out. So either we didn't realize they invented dome-penetrating rockets, or there's no dome, literally. I mean, that's...
Or it's a giant conspiracy by the Illuminati. We haven't been to space. We've never been to the moon. Aliens are controlling our thoughts, and we are living inside of a box.
And yeah, the moon landing was filmed in the basement of that's the joke. One of the old musicians from that time. It was filmed in his basement. Did anybody know what I'm talking about?
No.
But oh well. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I mean, once again, this proverbial dome would have created quite the problem for quite a few people throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Brett.
All right, gotta find where I was left off.
The dome, the birds in the sky, and the...
Oh yes, the birds in the sky. Right. Oh yeah, sea monsters, and every living creature that moves of every kind, with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so.
I just want to say real quick that I just want to say real quick that I wish more discussions about the Bible started with, oh yeah, sea monsters. That I really wish that was more of a thing. Oh yeah, sea monsters. But no, we once again, this gets back into what we were talking about earlier with the whole animals in their present state. You know, that whole thing, we can trace, as Dio mentioned, we can trace the DNA back. We can go back and look at the DNA throughout history, and we can see that, you know, we weren't just like, oh, cattle, okay, that's convenient. I'm so glad that was here. No, cattle happened through a long process of breeding and traits being more practical for survival. Therefore, that they survived. You know, it's a long process, and once again, I encourage you to go to Talk Origins to get a better explanation of what's going on than I can give you. But suffice to say, this whole section we're in right now, there's birds, I want them to breed. There's cattle, I want them to breed. There's fish, I want them to breed. It's a lot more complicated than that.
And actually, didn't birds evolve from certain dinosaurs?
If I'm not mistaken.
So then I'm just wondering where dinosaurs occur in the first chapters of
Well,
Genesis.
they don't, Michael, they don't. They were put here by the devil, remember?
That's right.
It's a faith tester.
No, the bones of the dinosaurs are put here to confuse
the bones of the dinosaurs.
Kangaroos don't show.
There's a musician that goes to There's a musician that goes to Ken Ham's rallies every time he has one that sings a song to kids that Behemoth was a sauropod. So if you want to go down that road, you're very welcome to go down that road as well. Although if you go down any roads involving Ken Ham, I will be disappointed in you.
There is one thing I wanted to point out too. In that song he sings, because I actually watched that crap. And yes,
I think we actually had it. I don't remember which one, but I think we had that in a previous episode. It might have been the one about creationism in schools, but I confirmed that. So, well, I'll try to remember after the fact to put that video in the description as well. So,
but
go ahead,
there's one problem I have with him teaching the kids this, and that's in his song. He explained that. Oh yeah, here's the major problem with it. Because he disregards an entire group of dinosaurs that have been discovered, and that is how he explains how dinosaurs, like God made dinosaurs big and bulky and eat plants. So my first thought was the T-Rex just got even sadder. First he gets tiny arms, now he has to eat plants. Man, wrong.
But he can't reach.
But yeah, I was like, okay, so basically you're telling him, oh yeah, these dinosaurs are real. That dinosaur that they say eats meat, nah, he doesn't eat meat.
Yeah.
Nah, his sharp teeth, they were made for plants, obviously.
So in some
yeah.
dinosaurs in our world really renders the idea of all the animals were just put here, it really renders it obsolete. So dinosaurs equal no instantaneous creator. Go ahead, Brandon.
Sorry.
Oh, go.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, go right ahead.
We're having a bit of a lag,
Not
I
just-
think. Okay. Yes.
Sorry. Not just dinosaurs, but the fossil record. I mean, the fossil record renders Genesis rubbish, and it renders the tradition that the Earth is 6,000 years old. It renders that rubbish as well, the young Earth creationists. I mean, Ussher's chronology is now gone, except for a few nascent fundamentalists hold on to it. But the fossil record's destroyed it. The science of geology has effectively destroyed Genesis and destroyed, well, it hasn't destroyed it. It will never destroy it because people are going to rationalize to try and keep their beliefs intact. But it's undermined it as far as the rational person is concerned. I mean, it's how people can still take the Bible seriously. It's like Lemuel K. Washburn once said that those who read the Bible as a reliable book, or the injury to the human mind that read the Bible as a reliable book, is beyond repair. It just boggles my mind. I don't. If you've read even one book about it, but they don't read. I don't know.
But Michael, don't you know Satan put the bones there to trick everyone.
No, it's the other way around. When I worked in Kansas, for 5 years, and I had a really smart colleague, an engineer, really smart guy, but he was an evangelical Christian in Kansas. And I asked him about the geological and the astronomical evidence. He goes, "What does all this mean? Like all this fossil?" He's, "Oh, God just put that there to test our faith." And I swear I wanted to slap him. Like, how did you get through engineering school and science with an attitude like that?
Yeah.
It just
I
had an ex-girlfriend that thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how I dated that girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, and that is one thing. While we're on this topic, I want to bring this up that we might, because we get, I don't want to say heated, but we get interested when we talk about stuff like this. If we say somebody's stupid because they're a creationist, we're not saying they're stupid across the board. We're not saying they're idiots everywhere. We're saying that in this particular situation, they've either ignored willfully the evidence or are unaware of the evidence and are, as a result, misinformed. So, for example, as Dia is talking about his former colleague, notice he called him a smart guy and then added the tag, but he also was this, so in this particular instance, he was wrong. It's very important to note that if you hear us say something like, well, these people are dumb, or that I can't believe people think this, it's because we're not saying they're stupid across the board. We're saying in a particular instance they have a huge glaring mistake that they're either willfully holding with them or are unaware of. So that's just an FYI to throw in there.
Yeah, look at Isaac Newton. I mean, he estimated the creation of the Earth around 6,000 years ago. He was a brilliant man, but he was still an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Copernicus. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
These guys were believers, and theists love to bring these examples up. And my refutation is always that great minds can still be held ransom to rubbish.
Yes.
It's just a fact. It's that part of their mind is being held ransom by a belief, and beliefs have certain defense mechanisms that come along with them. And even highly intelligent people, you'll find amongst apologists, Christian apologists, you'll find some very brilliant apologists. Like I've debated Matt Slick, and he's an extremely intelligent person, but he's just a twit as far as his beliefs are concerned. He'll just use every rationalization in the book to try and dodge, but I don't know. It's a fact of life,
There's a great quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson that I love. It was a presentation he was doing, and he said, "I don't want to know why 87% of the National Academy of Science doesn't believe in God. I want to know why 13% do." So even in the National Academy of Science, you've got some really brilliant scientists, and roughly 10% of them still believe in God. And my contention is that they just have not been able to overcome that childhood indoctrination we were given.
Yeah, very much. But I don't want to wander too off topic, so let's have Brandon continue to read us some more of Genesis.
All right, continuing. All right. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was good, nevermore. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image." There's a red flag right there about the whole mistake in the first verse to make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the wild animals of the earth, and over every creepy thing that creeps upon the earth.
Yeah, it's like, who is he talking to? Who's us? If I just want to make this quick point, and then we'll keep going. But as Michael brought up earlier, if it's supposedly monotheistic, who's us? Clearly, it's polytheistic, not monotheistic, or at least one side or the other got screwed up. Which, as Dio and Michael pointed out, it's the monotheistic side is not correct due to the translation from the. So.
Yes.
There's another alternative. There's another alternative.
Okay. Go ahead.
Imagine being alone for eons and eons and eons. You would start talking to yourself.
Well.
And you develop split personality. Like you might develop a number of personalities.
Well,
just to kind of keep yourself
maybe he had an old soccer ball.
Absolutely explain the radical. Well, the split personalities would absolutely explain the radical difference in personality between Old Testament God and New Testament Jesus, but that's not here nor there at this current time. So
that's a brilliant point.
Anyway, let's have
Actually,
Yeah.
can I just stop you there? There's actually, that relates to a point that goes back to the Old Testament itself, that when Wellhausen brought out the documentary hypothesis, one of the things scholars who followed in his tradition, and now that's a fairly solid tradition, one of the things scholars have noticed is the difference between the Yahwists, or the J writers, and the Elohists, the E writers, is the difference in the personality of the gods. They said, well, when you compare the Elohim gods to the Yahweh, you will notice a different personality, that Yahweh is a psychopath, basically, and he's full of energy, and he's crazy, and he's unrelenting, whereas Elohim is a little bit more reserved and relaxed and forgiving and not so crazy. I mean, not as crazy as Yahweh. And so that split personality issue goes back to even the book of Genesis itself. You see it there.
If I remember correctly, I had watched something. This guy, he was an evangelist. He, I can't remember what his YouTube account was, but he has actually taken most of his time of actually studying things to better understand his faith, and that actually led him to become an atheist. I wish I could plug him right now because it's very well done videos, very informative. He cites his references and his links and whatnot. He explained how what you have explained, how Elohim actually is a term used for multiple gods. Yahweh itself is a single God, and how Yahweh was part of the Elohim. And he was like, the best way I describe it is Yahweh was in that group of gods the Middle East version, or the Middle East version of Ares. He was like their god of war, and that explains why he's so warlike, also sadistic and murdering and stuff. And then the other gods of the Elohim were much kinder, because the other god, like the Greek gods, they weren't as ruthless as Ares was.
Yeah,
pretty much the best way he described it.
There's also the bit when in 622 BC Josiah was incorporating the different beliefs of the northern kingdom of Israel with those of the southern kingdom of Judah. El was the chief god in the Canaanite pantheon, which is what the Israelites were worshiping. Yahweh was the deity in southern Judah, and so that's how you have the conflicting names, the Yahweh and the Elohim, because one is coming from the north, one is in the south. And that's also right. Why you have certain, like, that's why you have the altar at Bethel, right? You've got the temple in Jerusalem, but they also mention the altar in the north. So scholars say the only reason they would do this is because they've got to appease all of the northern Israelites that are coming in, and you incorporate their beliefs and make it this whole big mishmash.
And Dio, don't a number of scholars have suggested that when the Elohist writers are writing, they're favoring Israel over Judah, but when the Yahwists are writing, they're generally favoring Judah over Israel. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Well, one of the Wellhausen's, I think it was Wellhausen's theory, was the core stories that are in Genesis, the E stories and the J stories, that these were originally their own oral traditions. So they were developed separately, and then they were later incorporated by the priestly editors later, sort of started bringing different traditions together. But definitely the Yahwist tradition very definitely puts themselves ahead. I think I've got one quote here. Genesis 49, verse 8, Judah, thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down to thee. So this is very much a J chapter that is very evident that it elevates Judah above everybody else. So the E traditions, I don't know if they necessarily put themselves ahead, but they're much more focused on things that are happening up in the north. But then when the conversion happened, when they're putting all this together, the Yahwist editors would elevate themselves. So especially if you read is it 2 Kings, when the northern kingdom falls to the Assyrians, it's very, very much, you can tell Judah's is writing the history. All these wicked kings of the north who did did not do right in the eyes of God. It is just one long diatribe. So it's very, very
in
clear.
Isaiah as well. In Isaiah, it's the same thing as well, where the alleged prophecy of the virgin birth, which isn't actually a virgin, it's a young woman. But anyway, leave that aside. It's about King Ahaz in the north siding with the Assyrians, and the whole prophecy about the child that will be born, which was either Isaiah's child or someone associated
with Hezekiah. The prophecy was about Hezekiah, who was Josiah's great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather.
Yeah, in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, right, 7:14
Yeah.
to 7:18 or somewhere around there. That this was about the conflict between Judah and Israel, and that Israel, the big evil kind of empire that sides with the Assyrians and da 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 da. But yeah, so there was always that conflict in the region, and like you said, it came from oral tradition, was blended together sloppily, and yeah, we've got the Bible and Christianity. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun information that we were just given there by our Michael and Dios. So I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about that to research some of the stuff talking about, because it's a little bit more than I even knew. So that's refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we're closing in on. We got about 15 minutes in the first half left. So Brandon, why don't we keep going and see how much of this we can chug away at before we get to the intermission?
All right. Well, I read a little bit ahead just to give myself a refresher here. And this was something I completely forgot about. That was a red flag. I'm going to go ahead and read this because remember, we are only on the 5th day here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we've taken 45 minutes to talk about 5 days, so this is
exactly.
We might. I think you're right earlier when you predicted that we might need more than 2 parts of this thing.
But
so
like I said,
but I'm loving it. Let's keep going.
Everybody remembers. Everybody here who's read it or has been told the story of Genesis knows it goes a certain way. Well, reading this, it's going a slightly different way. So on the 5th day, still on the 5th day, so God created humankind in His image. In the image of God, He created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. That's the end of chapter 1. If I remember correctly, the 6th day, I have been told throughout my life, the 6th day is when God created Adam and Eve, the first humans. Yet we have here on the 5th day, He created humankind.
Yeah, well, the 2 Genesis stories, the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, so we've got 2 creation myths, and they don't necessarily line up. Some of the research I did says that Genesis 1 was the Sumerian epic, and Genesis 2 with Adam and Eve is the Egyptian narrative adapted for the Hebrew scriptures. So
I've heard it was the Persian. But then I've also heard what you've said as well, Dio, that it was coming from the Egyptians as well, because I think both those empires had a big impact on the Old Testament, the Persian and the Egyptian. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Some of the research I did that they say that leads to the belief in the Egyptians is because obviously we know the story of Cain and Abel, but in the Egyptian mythology, Set kills Osiris. Like the twins are born, Osiris and Set kills Osiris. So some researchers are thinking this is the parallel here, and they demythologize it for the Jewish people who are reading this. So instead of being gods who get killed, they become the human children of Adam and Eve. So it's the same Egyptian story, just demythologized and brought down to the human realm.
Mm-hmm. Right, because I think in a way it's more impactful for humanity to see itself killing itself rather than 2 gods above them killing each other. In the sense that, personally, obviously, we have never seen gods kill each other. I don't care who you talk to, we've never seen that. But we have seen humanity kill each other, and when we're dealing with something that's so sensitive as the origins of humanity, for example, 2 of the first creations in the world killing each other is a very personal story, because it sets in the idea of how quickly can chaos come about, what is the cause of chaos, who are we to blame in such a distraught situation. So it's more personal when it's something like Cain and Abel, the first two sons, as opposed to God beings killing each other, because it's a different platform of reality. It's a different platform of impact for those who might be reading the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, Brandon, so we've hit the end of chapter 1, and we're halfway through the show, so that's nice. I have a feeling we're gonna have a lot of fun with this. But so what have we learned through the first chapter of Genesis, other than that we really shouldn't trust it? We've learned that everything was created in a few days. We learned that somehow there was light before there were stars. We've learned that dinosaurs are a faith tester. They didn't actually exist. We have learned that everything was created in its present state, and we learned that one or multiple beings did all of this, depending on who you ask and where you ask it from. So there's a lot of red flags that came just from the first chapter of this book. A lot of red flags. We have, obviously, as we mentioned, the diversity of animals being so immediate. Plants as well. We have the problem with the dome that would have given our space program a problem. We have a problem with astrological bodies being in positions which we know them not to be in. For example, the sun within our atmosphere, that would make things really hot. So we have a lot of red flags, both scientifically and historically, in the fact that we know the Earth to be older than it is supposed. We know that it would have taken a much different path to put in existence what we have than what has been put before us in this book. So I don't know about you gentlemen, but if I was a fresh reader, if I was somebody who had never heard of Christianity and I was reading this book before I knew anything else, I would immediately go, okay, I don't know how to handle this because it's not really that cool, but I don't know. Let me put it to you this way. Let me ask the panel. If you knew nothing about Christianity, if you knew nothing about the religion, the people, if the first encounter you ever had with it was at your current age and you just had read that chapter, would you continue reading the book?
And I could read?
Yeah, of course. You're at the age you are now, and you just know everything you do, except you know nothing about this religion. You've never heard of it. You've never encountered it. You're just the first time you're reading the Bible, and you just made it through the first chapter of Genesis.
I would think someone was taking the piss. I would think someone was taking the piss out of me. I was like, come on.
You can't take it just seriously.
Just in the first alone, with all those slight contradictions in it, it would make me go, well, if I never heard of Christianity or whatever or anything like this, I'd be like, this seems to be a really good way to start a book. This must be like how J.R.R. Tolkien started The Lord of the Rings. This is his book where he created the world of The Lord of the Rings. This is awesome. Where do we get to where he creates the hobbits? Where's that part?
Actually,
that's probably what I would think.
He was a
to be completely honest with you.
Yeah. So
that's probably what I would think, because I mean, knowing what I know and reading the Bible, I point out the contradictions. Not knowing anything about Christianity and reading the Bible, I would seriously probably would think it's some work of fiction that might have a cool ending to it, but little would I know, I'd be slowly disappointed.
Now, I don't want to go any farther until after the intermission, and we're going to go in just a few minutes here, but I wanted to ask our panel a question. It's been something that's been circulating through my head since I started having thoughts of atheism in general. Now, we're supposed to believe that, I mean, clearly because of the story, that this being is quite all-powerful, quite all-knowing, capable of doing pretty much anything that he feels like. The story is supposed that he created everything in the amount of time that we've been supposed, and then the last day he rested. He rested on the seventh day. Now, beyond the fact that it's convenient that we've broken this into a period of a week, which is a time measurement that is determined upon days, which is a time measurement determined upon the amount of time it takes for the Earth to complete a rotation. So that's very interesting, first of all, that we have a scientific fact dictating what is going on in the Bible. But beyond that, why would an all-powerful being need to rest? It's a question I've always wondered.
Asthma.
Okay.
Bronchitis.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked that question
He
too.
can't breathe. You know, these are the kinds of questions that I want people to ask when they get through this, because we're dealing with a being that's all-powerful, that just out of nothing here's this planet and these bodies in space, and then all this other stuff that I put on the planet and all the things the planet can do, and I'm all powerful enough to do this, but I think I'm going to take Sunday off because I'm behind on my reading or because I need to watch the football game, whatever. Like, an all-powerful being should never need to rest. It should never need to stop. If it did, it's because it decided that it was done. Everything was perfect, which anyone who's experienced this earth longer than 10 years knows that there's an incredible amount of horrible flaws. Why is my most important structure in my body, my brain, held up on a flimsical little straight line that could break with 50 pounds of force? Why is only, what is it, 30% of our Earth inhabitable by humanity, and that percentage is even shorter due to the fact that some of the terrain that's land is completely frozen or too hot or requires a certain adjustment due to the body temperature and whatnot. Anybody who can claim that this Earth is perfect or that it was created perfectly hasn't seen all of it, plain and simple. You go live in Antarctica and tell me that every bit of land is perfect for human life. That's a conversation I'd like to have with you.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I asked that question to you. Why does he need to rest? Unless it's the same thing with Cain and Abel. It's to make it relevant to them. Take one day off a week and rest.
Right.
Just terrible.
All right. Well, with that in mind, we're going to take our 10-minute intermission now. All that's going to happen is the panel is going to step away, refresh ourselves, and we're going to come back in 10 minutes and finish off this episode, which I have a feeling we're probably only going to get through one more chapter, but that's okay by my standards because this has been more informative than I could have ever hoped for. So we're not going to go anywhere. The video's not going anywhere. Don't leave. Don't go away. All that's going to happen is we're going to throw it on mute. And we're going to step away. We'll be right back. Somebody left. You don't listen to me when I talk. We're going to be right back, and we're going to go into chapter 2 when we come back. It's like I said, it's the same video, no new link, no nothing. So just go get a drink, kiss your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever you do when we go on intermission normally, and we'll be back in just 10 short minutes. If I could ask the panel to throw themselves on mute while we're gone, I'd be much appreciative.
No problem.
Real quick, we seem to have lost Michael. I'm not sure if he did that on purpose or not. Oops, didn't mean to do that. But hopefully Michael will be right back, and we'll take care of that. So thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone. I am back. I see Michael's back. I don't know, Michael, were you having some connection issues there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you doing?
Oh, good.
We were
Good.
on mute, audio and mic mute, in order to keep the traffic down.
Hello.
Hi, Brandon.
And I lost my overlay.
So, Michael, do you remember how to get your? All you got to do is go back into the Hangout toolbox, and I'll show you how to get it back up before we resume.
Okay,
Hey guys, I'm here.
Click the mirror.
Okay, that's fine. We've still got 3 minutes, so
Okay,
you just click on the little. Okay. You just click on the little guy in the circle there, Michael, and then you just go down to custom overlay,
Done that, yeah.
and then you just load the photo in again. Mm-hmm. There it is.
Thanks, man.
Yep. You're a little quiet. Is there a way that
Am I?
we can get your mic to be a little louder? Yeah.
Let's see. Is that better?
No, that's about the same, actually.
Shit, what's happened there? Is that better?
No, it's still about the same.
Shit. I don't know what's happened. Hang on. What is going? Oh,
Yeah, I don't know what's happened.
Where's settings? Settings here. Wait. Voice. Let's check it. How's that?
That's about the same still.
It's the same.
Say something. Just say a sentence real quick.
A sentence, real quick.
That's better. That's a little better, yeah.
Is that better? All right.
Yeah, that's better.
All right.
I don't know about anybody else, but I spent my break playing music because that's what I typically. And I will give $100 to the person who can successfully name the song.
That's Metallica. I don't know.
Nope.
Going through the Reaper. Going through the Reaper.
You got it. I owe $100. I owe Dio $100.
I'll come collect.
Still got. I'm sure you problems. Alright.
Kaboom.
Well, we got about my guess would be about 20 seconds before break. One thing I will do while we're on intermission still is make a quick announcement. That I should have really made this announcement before we kicked off, but this is in fact just one episode of a long series that we're going to do. We're actually going to do this exact thing for every single book in the Bible, and then if we have time and can find a good translation, the Quran as well. So I do want to introduce this idea that this is going to be a long-standing thing. We are going to do this with every book of the Bible. So as many parts as it takes, I don't care if it takes us the next 500 episodes, we are going to do this. And of course, we will take breaks. We will do other episodes, things that come up that might be prominent, but we plan on getting all the way from the beginning to the end of the Bible doing this. And I'm really happy that it's actually being done the way that we're doing it here today, because it's giving people, because Brandon's reading it, it's giving people who might not have previously read an opportunity to read. So this is a really good overall thing. But Jason or Dio, if you're ready, and Michael, if you're ready, and Brandon, if we're all ready to go, we can continue the show.
Cool.
Just get on my packing done so I can run to the airport after this.
Yes,
All right,
yes, you're on your way. I hope you mentioned, you mentioned there might be weather problems, so I hope your flight goes well for you.
Well, because it's the Super Typhoon Haiyan's like the size of Europe, and it's sort of hanging off the coast of Vietnam, so I've got to fly around it somehow.
Yeah.
Is it coming to Japan?
Well, good luck to you on your journey there.
It's heading into Vietnam right now.
Oh, so it's not going to go up to Japan?
Can you say it again,
That
Michael?
sucks. I was just wondering if the typhoon was going to come to Japan.
No, it's headed to Vietnam. There's a great, Michael, especially if you're living in Japan, there's a fantastic website I found a couple years ago called Tropical Storm Risk, all one word. Has beautiful, like the storm tracks, predictions, wind fields. It's perfect, especially living in Japan where you guys get hit with them too.
Yeah, we get hit a lot.
All right. Well, we hope everybody in those countries is not affected We hope everybody in those countries is not affected by the storm, but we do hope everybody is affected by the content in Genesis chapter 2. So, Brandon, take us away. All right. We might be experiencing a bit of lag, so heads up.
Okay. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day God finished the work he had done, and rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. A bit redundant there. So God blessed the seventh day and holiday, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one till the ground, or to till the ground. But the stream would rise from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. And the Lord God planted. Exactly.
That's an interesting change from what we heard from a chapter ago, not even a book ago, a chapter ago. That's quite interesting of a change that we heard there. That,
yep.
You know, just the way it came about. And you know, this is one of those things where, if I may just jump in real quick,
go right ahead.
This is one of those things where we often hear the opposition argue about evolution, saying, well, if humanity came from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys? Beyond the fact that that's incorrect, I would simply counter-argue with, if humanity came from dirt, why is there still dirt? I mean, I don't know.
Dust to dust.
You know, why is it that people are so upset about the idea that we shared an ancestor with primates, and that at some point in time we had a very similar relationship to what our cousins and apes would be today, but they have no problem with, we're totally made out of dirt. Like, how could you not see that? Like, I would be more offended if somebody's like, you are dirt, than you are an ape. I'd be like, well, at least I'm a life form if I'm an ape, you know? At least I have consciousness and I can do things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, getting back to just that one point about God resting on the seventh day, scholars of mythology refer to that kind of myth as a charter myth. That is, as Dio pointed out earlier, it's what justifies the rest on the seventh day, the Sabbath, or the Sunday now it is for Christians. But it's what justifies. And charter myths, myths that create rituals, they create ceremonies, they create traditions, and so they're set out to justify certain practices, and so that's what you'd call a charter myth. And so, yeah, anyway, fun fact, it's over.
Well, thanks very much for that. That's very informative. Okay, Brandon, let's do it.
All right, so here's where it gets interesting. So,
oh boy.
Okay, like always, I read a little bit ahead just to see what this one actually says, and to be honest with you, I'm a little fucking confused. Because we just stated he now just created he created the water and all this stuff, all the animals. He created man out of dust.
A paragraph ago, it was done, and so let's see where we're going now.
So now that he just created man, this is where we left off after man became a living being. And the Lord God planted the Garden of Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. Okay. Out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river flows.
Hold on, I don't mean to interrupt, but the sentence that particularly caught me. The sentence that particularly caught me, other than obviously that apparently man was created and put on the earth, according to that previous sentence, was that he created every tree that is good for food and attractive to the eye. I would very interested to know in how different trees existed in one climate, because pine trees are attractive, and so are palm trees, and so are oaks. But you're not going to find those three things in the same place. You're not going to find a palm tree growing next to a pine tree. And so if the Garden of Eden contained every tree that's attractive and every tree that's good for food, was the Garden of Eden like a centimeter of climate here, a centimeter of climate there, a square foot of climate here, that somehow allowed for all of this different climate life to exist in one spot? There's a question for you.
Don't make me think too much.
We had Brandon reconnect here. As I mentioned, we might have had a bit of lag there. So, Brandon, you're going to want to throw your overlay back on real quick.
Doing that right now.
But meanwhile, just to sum that up, because Brandon was going to ask a question. Dio, I don't mean to make you think too much, but whoops. Hey, Travis, you joined the live show. We're going to need you to back out real quick, bud.
We love you, though, Travis.
Thanks.
Just know that.
We do love him. That's our friend Travis. I don't know how that happened. We apologize for that interruption, but nonetheless, I don't mean to make you think too much there, Dio, but it's just an interesting question to ask, how all of these different climates could exist in one place, or alternatively, how these different lives that require different climates could have exist in one climate zone.
Yeah, I never really thought about it.
But Brandon, before you got disconnected, you were going to ask a question. And
well, I was going to make
statement
a statement about this. Reading this, it specifically stated he made every tree and plant look good and bear fruit to eat. And it says he created the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That means he made that tree look good. And then we all know later on he goes on to tell Adam, eat whatever you want, but not that. But I made it good looking. Why? Because I'm going to create Admiral Akbar and say, it's a trap. Purpose. That's what he did. He made a freaking trap. But we'll get onto that later.
Yeah.
That's foreshadowing, everyone.
That he created English terms. Now, knowing also that he created the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's very clear that at that point that he created evil. So, I mean, because if he created the knowledge of good and evil, he would have had to create good and evil originally so that the knowledge of them could be understood. Otherwise, the original humans had brains that I don't understand how they worked if that is not the case. But regardless, so anyone who ever says God didn't create evil, well, here you go. Here's the proof that he did. The second chapter of Genesis. That's the proof that he did.
Yeah, not only that,
ahead,
but you read Isaiah 45:7. I, the Lord, created the light and the darkness. I created good and I created evil. I the Lord, created all these things. And this was written by Isaiah, and some scholars propose the theory that it was just at the beginning of the Second Temple era when some of the more Persian beliefs were coming into the religion of Judaism, and the Persians had a dualistic religion which had a devil and a god. And before this, in Judaism, there was no Satan, which is why you find certain contradictions. And so I think it's between the book of Samuel and 1 Chronicles, I can't remember now off the top of my head, where David's tempted to take a census of the people of Israel. But one of the books says he was tempted by Satan to take the census. The other book says that he was tempted by God. What book? Well,
Samuel was the original. Samuel was the original one. Where he did and then Chronicles retells the story of how Satan tempted David to do that.
That's right.
And it's interesting. The points you make about it was the Persian, the exposure to Persian Zoroastrianism, where it's only after that period where Satan starts to evolve into a much more independent character. Like in Job, he's not acting independently at all. He's still leashed by God. But by Chronicles, he's sort of acting independently. But he's still not a fully evil character. So yeah. So it was very much the exposure to Persians where this.
I remember correctly from. If I remember correctly, reading, because I remember I got that information from you, Mike, that post you made on your Facebook page that led me to that article you wrote about Lucifer in the Bible and all this stuff that had all that information about it. Very good, by the way. Very, very informative.
Thanks.
You explained in it how, and the same guy from YouTube that I talked about before about the creation, about the different gods and the Elohim and all that stuff, he also explained where the term Satan or Satan actually came from, what it actually meant in the Hebrew language, and how it also evolved. And I noticed you and him pretty much exactly same information right there. So I mean, right there I know I'm looking at good information, but it really does explain a lot into how that if you actually read the Bible, you will realize that the Satan you're taught about in church does not match what's being described in the Bible whatsoever at all. I mean, there's no mention in the Bible of any fallen angel to begin with, specifically one that was in a sense the right hand of God. That's not even really the New Testament for an explanation. He just kind of shows up in the New Testament. Everything else in conjuncture, even the term Lucifer was, if I remember correctly, used, like you said, used to describe a person in that time. It wasn't an actual, like, the actual name of the devil, but it was
against the king of Babylon.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. Thank you. I couldn't remember who it was because only read the whole thing once, so I don't remember it all. But yes, that's exactly what it was, and that's where it came from. I want to think like most of the stuff that we deal with nowadays, from apologetics and stuff like that, it's a lot of, like, including the Antichrist. You know, the Antichrist will rise out of the sea. That's a term that came about, if I remember correctly, the 14th or 15th century, where in the Bible it actually states, Jesus says, anybody who doesn't believe in me is an Antichrist. That means all atheists, anybody of a different religion who don't believe in Jesus are Antichrists. People completely forget. They think that, oh yeah, the Antichrist will come and the beast will come, but the term Antichrist, used to describe everybody who doesn't believe in Christ, is now being used to describe the same thing twice. And people don't understand these mix-ups because of all these years of misconceptions from the Bible, all these important figureheads adding their own information to it and thus making it worse.
Right.
Not only that, but you can find the origin of the Antichrist epithet in the Zoroastrian texts as well. You see the Anti-Mithras, and backward flies the arrow of the Anti-Mithras, and you read that in the Shast of the Avesta. And so you'll find these themes, they've been adopted from larger cultures. I mean, myth comes down to us in the same way that folk tales and stories do, and only the difference between religion and myth, or religious myth and so-called pure myth, is that it's what you believe, isn't it? Myth is always true to the people within the religion or within the culture,
right?
But it's not true to those with an objective perspective.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go real quick back to the ideas when you were talking about the two different versions that suggest one was tempted by Lucifer and the other was tempted by God. I'd like to just point out a little line of thought here, as if it was if it was God indeed that was doing the tempting rather than the devil. What kind of parent figure, for all intents and purposes, is that would go, here I have created this magnificent tree with this apple that contains knowledge, but don't eat it, okay? That would be like me having a kid and saying, if you don't eat all the cookies before dinner, I will buy you a video game tonight. And then the whole time that in between dinner and where we are now, I'm holding the cookies in front of your face going, don't they smell so delicious? These are the best cookies I've ever made in my life. These cookies will never make you want to eat anything but these cookies again. I'm doing that for hours and hours and hours. Okay, maybe, yeah, it's beyond the fact that it's really annoying and really not a good thing to do if you're trying to show somebody how to behave. That's really detrimental, because if we have a creator figure that is that easily willing to tempt its own creatures just so it can be like, aha, I got you, now I'm gonna make everything horrible. I mean, what are we doing? What is that being doing? Why? Why even create if your whole purpose of creation is just to spoil them? And I don't mean spoil them in the sense that, like, give them everything they want. I mean spoil them in the sense of ruining them for the sake of ruining them.
Yeah,
well,
and it's
most of God's traits, they're very human characteristics, right? You know, petty, jealous, spiteful. These are all human characteristics that we've projected onto God, and we're made in His image.
And isn't that convenient? That God takes on human characteristics, and here are humans telling the story? Isn't that convenient?
And not only that, but
Michael,
the point you raised, Jeremiah.
I want to give you the opportunity to say it.
Yeah, sorry. The point you raised,
we have a little
Jeremiah.
bit of lag.
No worries. The point you raised, Jeremiah, was really good, and that's that. Well, He's tempted them with this tree of good and evil. They're not allowed to eat from it, but they haven't been taught the difference between right and wrong yet. So disobeying God was not actually an evil thing in their mind. They couldn't know the difference because they hadn't eaten the apple yet, or the fig, or the orange, whatever the hell it was. But they hadn't eaten the fruit yet, and so it's pretty unjust to punish them before they know the difference between good and evil. To punish them for doing something wrong when they didn't know it was wrong. It's unjust.
And not just a basic punishment, an eternal punishment. This is a punishment that is technically, according to some, still in play. The sins of the father and so forth. But this is a infinite punishment for what could be considered by many a finite crime due to the fact that there was ignorance involved in play. So what kind of just being, and I swear to God we're going to get back to the, no pun intended, I swear we're going to get back to this thing, but what being punishes its own creations infinitely for a simple mistake, such as this? Especially with the points that you put into it, Michael.
And also, if we can impute sin, from the eating of that fruit onto the entire human race, can we use that same logic and impute sin onto modern Christians for the crimes that their theological ancestors committed through the Dark Ages and so forth?
Right. Well, that
if
is
imputed
the
sin
idea
is...
Yeah, that is the idea of the sins of the father affect the son, so that, I mean, eventually, of course, it's going to tie back to everyone. So, I mean, wouldn't that also then therefore tie into the philosophy, the idea that I've proposed in a couple of my independent videos, that if the Old Testament is 100% true, as some will claim, that there is no salvation for anyone because the original sin took place before there were commandments, in which case there is no forgiveness for the original sin. So that doesn't matter what you do, because you were born of someone who was born of someone through a long chain who was born of Adam and Eve, it doesn't matter what you do, you're immediately built to fall the second you exist.
But Christian theology says that Jesus came and washed all that away. His blood washed all that away. But the trouble is, and here we get back to Genesis, is that if we debunk Genesis, then we debunk the reason for Jesus. His whole point hinges on Genesis.
Not to mention that if the Old Testament is completely true, as they would suggest, then the New Testament is a fallacy, because in the Old Testament God claims that He's eternal and unchanging, and then Jesus is a physical embodiment of changing your mind. So either the New Testament is true, in which case the Old Testament is irrelevant, or the Old Testament is true and the New Testament is irrelevant, or there's the more likely theory that neither of them are true, because they render each other irrelevant. So, but anyways, let's get back to the book, Brendan. I know you've probably been sitting there like, where the hell am I, for about 10 minutes now. So I want to give you the opportunity to pick up where we were. Go ahead and take us to where we were going next, buddy.
Before I continue, though, I feel this disclaimer came a little too late. I want to apologize on behalf of everybody here in the panel. We have ruined half the book for all of you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, now I got to remember where I was at. Okay, so I think
spoiler.
Yeah, out of the spoilers in this. Oh my God! Out of the ground, the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant. Okay, good enough. Okay, a river flows out of Eden to the water, to water the garden, and from there it divides and becomes 4 branches. The name of the first is Pishon, and I probably butchered that. It is the one that flows around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one that flows around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris, which flows east of Assyria, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. Didn't butcher those last 2. Yeah. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, you may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day you will eat it, or you eat of it, you shall die, which we've already covered. Then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner. So out of the ground the Lord God formed every animal in the field and every bird of the air and brought... Didn't we just get through this? I could have sworn he just did this.
Not only that, but a chapter ago he did it in the other order. A chapter ago he created plants, then animals, then people, and in this chapter he created people, then plants, then animals. So this is a very, very interesting one chapter, not even a book later. This is one chapter. A few pages later, we have a radically different timeline here. That's a big red flag. At least to me, it is. I'm certain to you as well. But I mean, how could we not fact check back one chapter? How could, like, I don't know about you, but I am a writer, so every single thing that I write is going to get read 5 or 6 times to make sure that it's all congruent. How did we not check back one chapter to check the order of creation?
Yeah, well, they probably figured most people back then couldn't read, and it was all done. The temple priests were the literal ones, controlled the dissemination. So.
Well, I mean, did they also think that the people back then had no memory to speak of? I mean, because if the people back then couldn't read, that's one thing I could understand, because one guy can read and he's telling the story, but I would like to believe that people are smart enough to remember what they've heard before. For example, if I'm going to talk to a 5-year-old and tell him about Santa, I don't expect that next Christmas he's going to come up to me and have no idea who Santa is. So I would like to think that these people would have at least been able to remember the order of creation, considering how supposedly important it was, to the point where the next story comes along and they should be able to go, wait a minute, didn't you say it was this way before?
Yeah, I think it's just...
Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but...
I mean, look at all the different contradictions that are scattered throughout, you know. Just, to me, it's just it's institutional arrogance. They just didn't care. You know, they were the control, wisdom, because I ponder that in my book, too. Why don't they correct these mistakes?
Right.
Actually, here's something funny. The new Bible of the Jehovah's Witness, they took out anything that contradicts itself. They have somebody actually.
What are they left with, like a page?
It's from what I understand, from what I've read, this new Bible, they took out they took. I guess they could say they picked sides and said, "This is what we'll go for. Anything that contradicts it, gone, just gone, doesn't exist." From what I understand.
I guess this goes back to my question earlier of who is to decide what is to be taken literally and what is metaphorical. Apparently, it was the Jehovah's Witness. There's our answer. They were the ones who got to decide.
Can I
Anyways,
just say,
Brandon. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Can I say something on the origin of the Eden myth, which is very Sumerian as well, and Dio's probably aware of this as well, that not only is there evidence within the clay tablets that were excavated from Nineveh and in other places in Iraq or ancient Mesopotamia, but the word itself, Eden, is a Sumerian word, which means steep or plain or uncultivated land. And when you look at it, what would have been in that area it's the Garden of Eden. That is, it's a garden in a place called Eden. So what would have been there before God planted that garden, logically speaking, there would have been nothing there. And the Sumerian word for nothing, an area with nothing in it, is Eden. It's an exact phonetic and transliterated word, which comes from the Assyrian language. So you even find the word Eden comes from the Sumerian, and I'm not just speaking off the top of my head. You can read this in the Jewish Encyclopedia. I don't know if it's the same one Dio was referring to. It's a 22-volume set. Or you can read it in the Oxford Online Sumerian Lexicon, and that's put together by the Oxford University. These are facts that have been established very roundly. Not only that, but there are details in the garden myth. For example, when God puts up the flaming sword that spins in all directions, that detail is in the ancient Sumerian myths as well. The grove of Anu is the tree of life, and so you have all these parallels that exist to the much earlier Sumerian myths. But yeah, you find that Eden myth, and also the two rivers that locate the garden in Mesopotamia itself is, the Euphrates and the Tigris. Some theologians have tried to assert that the Garden of Eden was in Ethiopia, but I find that ridiculous because, well, how can the Euphrates and the Tigris order a garden that's on a separate continent? But anyway, yeah. So I don't know if Dio has anything to add.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I know it's chapter 3 of Genesis where we talk about Adam and Eve and the serpent, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it ties back together. And I know even with Noah, we haven't gotten to the story of Noah yet. All of these things come from the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Noah's Ark story is the Epic of Gilgamesh, but so is the Eden story. In particular, there were 3 aspects: the tree of life, the serpent, and the description of its being slithering on his belly. Then I've got a quote from Joseph Campbell from his series, The Power of Myth, where he says, "The garden is the serpent's place. It is an old, old story. We have Sumerian seals from as early as 3500 BC showing the serpent and the tree and the goddess, with the goddess giving the fruit of life to a visiting male." So once again, all of this stuff is coming from ancient Sumeria. None of this is new. This is all derivative.
Yeah, the Tower of Babel, the flood. Yeah.
Hey, Brandon, while you're typing, can I ask you to throw yourself on mute?
Oh yeah, sorry.
It's a little audible. And so this is.
Sorry, did Jeremiah freeze?
Yep,
This is a bunch of very informative stuff that you guys have just given us, and I think the fact alone that how many times have we drawn to these? Yeah, how many? I might be lagging a little bit. Let me know when I come back. I don't know when I'm back or...
You're good. Yeah, you're in. You're good. You're frozen.
Quick, come back to us.
He's
Use
frozen.
the audible.
Oh, he's
Hello,
back.
hello.
Hello, sir.
We've been experiencing a little bit of lag all night. So, okay, all right. Yes, now that I'm good. Okay, now that I'm good, I want to get back to what I was saying. Apologize for that once again, just in case that first apology didn't go through. Isn't it interesting how many times we've already drawn parallels to these former myths that have existed long before Judaism and Christianity? How many times? At least 5 or 6 times we've referenced some of these other myths and some of these other places on Earth where the Jews had visited before they wrote these stories. So, I mean, the fact that we've had to reference so many other texts so many times already should be enough to be like, well, maybe this is quite the borrowed tale. Maybe I shouldn't be taking this on a factual basis.
Yeah.
You would think, but
I mean, imagine if somebody wrote. Yeah. Imagine if somebody wrote a parallel story about a wizard named Larry Motter, and he went through all of this crazy wizard stuff in exactly the same order that the book Harry Potter did. Wouldn't you wonder a little bit how that author got away with that story?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
And if you knew that that author had been proximate to the work of Harry Potter, or had owned that book, then, or had been friends with the author of Harry Potter, wouldn't you say, hang on a minute, they knew each other? This guy later writes this book. I know they knew they were proximate to one another. It makes it even more suspect, I think.
Yeah, but in 3,000 years, only scholars of Harry Potter would know that, right? The general populace would only know the story of Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
true.
meanwhile, there would be circles to Voldemort and all kinds of other crazy things. But don't want to get off the point too much, so why don't we keep hammering away here? We'll go back to Brandon, and Brandon can keep taking us through the book.
all right. So we started with one creation story. We're in the next. That kind of takes place in a certain alternate universe. So here's where this part gets a little confusing. After we've already decided God just created man. It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper and his partner. So out of the ground the Lord God formed every animal in the field and every bird of the air, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep he decided he needed a helper as his partner. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one was taken. And here's where these last 2 sentences are the end of chapter 2, and this is where it gets a little weird. Therefore,
this is where it gets weird.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little weird, because you're like, okay, so in this one, he's created Adam and just Adam, and now he's created Eve. Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Where did his mother and father come from all of a sudden? God was like, oh, traditional wedding. Poof, there's your mother and father.
It's very important to note that it was a traditional wedding and not a homosexual wedding, because that would just be wrong in the eye.
Yeah, I
think what's even
traditional wedding part in there.
I think what's even more of an interesting idea to me is that the fact that Eve was created from Adam's rib. So when they ended up going along the lines and reproducing and creating their first children, was it technically sex or masturbation? That's my question, because I mean, I know it's a silly point, but But the thing is, if we're going to start breaking apart everything, then we need to look at some of the goofier stuff too, like whether it was Adam having sex with himself when he was having sex with Eve. Are we all the product of literally one body? Is
And
that
did
not
Adam have a
weird
belly
to
button?
anyone else? Yeah, did Adam have a belly button? Why
Yeah.
is he painted with one? That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because
So
God
we've reached
felt
the end of
need
chapter
to
2
everyone
here.
else.
I don't know how much...
Got
Right.
about 20,
Well, we've reached the
23
end of chapter
minutes.
2 here. We got about 20 minutes left. So, yeah, I don't know if we'd be able to churn through chapter 3 in 20 minutes. We'd have to really make sure we stayed on point.
Mhm.
Could I just?
But I
could
kind
I,
of the serpent story to be. Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, last thing on that specific
fine.
aspect of the myth. Yeah, that's the root of misogyny in the Bible, isn't it? That's a woman being made from and for man as a servant, as a this is misogynistic. We don't need that anymore. And I've torn that
Right.
out in my Let's Tear Up the Bible series, in my episode on misogyny. It's just we don't need it. It's rubbish. It's not scientific. It's harmful in a society that's trying to strive toward a more egalitarian structure. And I think we can tear that out.
I think it should have been in there in the first place, to be
Right.
honest with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, your point, Jeremiah.
Here's the other. If we're considering.
Be right back.
Yeah. Well, here's the other. Considering we are on the misogyny topic, if Eve was created from Adam's rib, and Eve is a servant, and according to later parts in the Bible, no good and not deserving of speaking, and women are for men, as Michael said, couldn't it be said then, if Eve is worthless and contains Adam's rib, is Adam also worthless, or is something about Adam that still exists within just Adam somehow making him superior? Because if Eve is made from Adam's material, but only she is worthless, then either Adam is also worthless or Eve is not worthless. I mean, that's my logical breakdown. Because here's the argument, okay? Adam is worth something. Eve is made from Adam, therefore Eve is worth something. Is that not that? I mean, I consider that to be a logical pathway. I don't know about anybody else. I don't see how we change that to be Adam is worth something, Eve is made from Adam, therefore Eve is not worth something.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
interesting.
problem.
That is a very
Yeah.
big problem.
And there's a comment, just looking at the comments, there's a comment made by Eliza
Sure.
Langston, and she said, what, nobody's going to
Eliza.
wake up while someone, Eliza, sorry, nobody's going to wake up
Yeah.
while someone steals their rib? Like,
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, yeah, that is a very good point.
Ooh.
that's pretty...
At least not if they wake up in a bathtub with a lot of ice in it. I don't, I don't want to comment on that, but that's the, oh God, you took my rib, sold it on the black market for heroin. I know
That's
we're
brilliant.
just being goofy now, but I mean,
Yeah.
she makes a
But
good
it's
point,
goofy.
though. I mean,
Yeah.
even if it's a silly point, yeah. I think, and she makes a good point that actually makes a bigger point, which is that this whole thing is pretty ridiculous. We have two different chapters in the same book which say two different things about the order of creation. We have a series of events that seem completely ridiculous to comprehend, like a garden of nothing contained everything. That's interesting. We have, as Eliza mentioned, not being someone stealing your rib. Did they replace the rib? Like, did it grow back, or was Adam like lopsided? Like, what happened?
Did you take that whole little section? I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, it's very. And did he have a belly button? These seem like questions. I mean, we're sitting here laughing, but let's be real. These are genuine concerns that scientists would be like, well, considering how dumb this is, considering able to laugh at this and not take it seriously, it's kind of sad to think that there's someone who read this and went, no, I'm 100% on board. Keep going. That's the sad part. That's the sad part, because that means that there are people out there who believe that the first man had no belly button, one rib, and had a female sidekick that was also him. And they're just like, and every climate, as I mentioned earlier, every tree of every climate existed in one place. And there's somebody out there going, I agree. Like, no, you don't agree to that. Did you click accept without reading the terms and conditions? Like, what happened here? Don't do that. Don't do that.
In an age of information, ignorance is a choice.
Exactly.
Yes.
Especially this kind of information, because this at a point, this isn't even information. It's common sense. Common sense should dictate that you can't create a human being from one rib. Common sense should dictate that our skin isn't made out of dirt. I don't know how many other things we can go to and be like common sense. But the fact is, I shouldn't have to look you in the eye and tell you, no, you're not made of dirt. It should be quite obvious that you aren't made of dirt without me having to tell you that you're not made out of dirt. At least to me, I can't speak for everyone, but at least to me, it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
So,
thinking people, don't necessarily, there's the line from House: rational arguments don't work on religious people, otherwise there would be no religious people.
Yeah. But I mean, even to not, I don't want to beat the bush to death here. If that's a phrase, if it's not, I'm gonna make it one. I don't want to do that. So. We've gotten through 2 chapters of Genesis here, and Brandon, you were absolutely right when you said we were going to need more. We've got through 2 chapters of Genesis. So,
by the way, I should warn you real quick, Jeremiah. If you want to go through all of it chapter by chapter, there's 50 chapters. If we're doing 2 chapters a night, that's going to be 25 episodes. That's half a year.
Well, you could probably just do the major topics, like creation.
We should probably get the major topics from now on.
Abraham.
Yeah, for part 2, we'll go into more of... But, I mean, this episode really did kind of bring into light the creation myth, the story of creation, how many days it took, how it was done. And I want to go around the panel now, and that we've heard pretty much the entirety of the creation aspect of Genesis. I want to go around to the panel and ask the panel what they think of this, beyond, obviously, like, our hypercriticalness. But, I mean, how do you take this creation myth as opposed to the more scientific way that we look at the world? How does the creation myth of Genesis match up to the Big Bang Theory? How does the idea of all life being in its present form match up to evolution? I want to go around and get the panel's opinions and factual data on this, because I think this is a really important critical discussion to have if we're going to talk about Genesis.
First, I should correct you in what you said. It doesn't match up to it at all. the creation myth does not match up to... Yeah, I know what you mean, but just to clarify, that's not what he means, that it's on the same level as. He's not giving it that much credit, people. Anyway, I'll let either...
That should be kind of obvious. I'm hosting.
I'll let either Michael or Dio answer that one, since they have more information than I do, and they probably speak better than me.
That's not true.
You have an accent, sir. That means you speak better than me.
I'd rather have your accent.
Ah, cool.
You have a cool
Fair
accent.
enough.
That's cool.
Fair enough.
Anyway,
right.
I'll let Dio take it if he wants to take it.
Yeah, I've got a perfect quote here. It's a quote from Richard Dawkins' book, Devil's Chaplain, that I included in my book, because it speaks, Jeremiah, to exactly what you just said about how does the creation story line up with the Big Bang, and the reality of the science behind what happened. And I love this quote. He says, "The young Earth view is not just that it is false, but that it is petty, small-minded, parochial, unimaginative, unpoetic, and downright boring compared to the staggering, mind-expanding truth." And I love that quote so much that I used it in my book, because it is true. I mean, the science behind the Big Bang and galactic evolution and the building up of higher elements, nucleosynthesis, as a star supernovas, and creates the heavier elements that are in our bodies, that we are all made of stardust. That is much more profound and mind-expanding than this kindergarten story of Genesis. So
you're right.
So that's my take.
Sure. But even so, we've made it through the chat. We made it through the book about creation myths, and we've sat here and literally point for point went through and went, this just didn't happen, and this is why it didn't happen. Whereas if you go through something as the Big Bang, which is the most accepted scientific explanation, it would take you a lot of a different strategy to disprove such a thing. And for the record, this idea was not proposed by some guy writing a book and then all atheists went, that's what happened, as religion is. There are so many tests and works, written works for this thing, and I'm not going to sit here and try to explain it, because to me trying to explain that would be horrible butchering of such thing. But you got to understand, the reason this is considered high science is because of how much work had to be done to actually demonstrate it. I can't even put into perspective the amount of work that had to be done to demonstrate the Big Bang Theory, and if I tried, I would do no justice to such event. So, to talk about what Genesis is, it is absolutely, not only is it unimaginative to follow Genesis, but it's mental suicide to subject your brain to such a simple idea and hold it as the ultimate idea. If you're not letting your brain think above Genesis, you're not letting your brain think above anything, as far as I'm concerned.
Can I make a point that you just were touching on, Jeremiah?
Yes, please, please.
I think a lot of the problem there is that creationists in particular are guilty of propagating this notion that a scientific theory is a theory in layman's terms, and they don't understand the difference between a scientific theory and a theory, okay, or a hypothesis. Right. So a scientific theory is the best information based on the best evidence we have, right? It's the best explanation based on the best evidence we have. It's been tested. It's been run through the mill. It's been, looked at over and over again from many different angles. It's a scientific theory. Whereas they'll say, well, evolution's just a theory. Okay, well, so is gravity. So go jump off a building and check it out.
Intelligent falling.
Exactly. Another thing is
I like that phrase. Yeah. I've never heard that phrase, intelligent falling, before. That's really awesome.
My book, check it out.
I would say
I will.
I'll have to. Another thing I have to say along those lines is the misinformation spread about things such as evolution. Like, the most common argument is, oh yeah, you say we all evolved from monkeys. No, we do not.
No, we don't say that.
No
one says that.
The other thing that I actually completely didn't realize until I commented on it on Rationally Thinking and Honest Humanist to somebody, somebody had asked, why is there so much confusion between most theists and evolution in general and whatnot? And I told them that's because what I've noticed from most theists in their arguments is for some reason, they lump abiogenesis, evolution, and the Big Bang all into one thing and just simply call it evolution for the most part, because for some reason they feel that evolution doesn't just explain how life in a sense evolved as it was alive, but also for some reason they feel it explains how life came into being and how the universe came into being. It's like, no, I mean, that's not it. Whoever taught you that taught you wrong. And I've been in church sermons where they have attempted to tell people what evolution is all about, and after going through and looking up the information myself over the last couple of years, I've realized they definitely were lying. They've lied about a lot of stuff, and they might think it's true, but I highly doubt that people telling these lies believe it to be just their way of trying to keep people in the pews. If you want to learn if you want to learn science the right way, you need to take science courses. You need to go look up the information yourself from the scientific community, because a pastor who's been preaching for like 32 years, I guarantee you, does not know anything about science for the most part, unless he's actually studied it, and even then his information might be skewed because of his beliefs.
Right.
Can I quote the church father Jerome?
You don't have to ask to do anything, Michael. Just do it.
Just
go ahead and do it.
It relates to what Brandon was saying.
Sure.
Father Jerome once said that there is nothing so easy as by sheer volubility to deceive a common crowd or an uneducated congregation. And this is what we're dealing with, I think. This is what Brandon's talking about.
Yep. And all of the points that Dio's made, I've made, Mike's made, and you've made, Jeremiah, all equal to why the creation myth and the Bible itself is attempted to be held up on the same steeple as evolution and the Big Bang and science in general, because so many people are taught misinformation and they take it wholeheartedly. Because why would the person telling them who supposedly talks to a non-lying, all-loving God lie to them? And they don't follow through with that. They think they're being told the truth, so they take it at face value. Very few people like me were skeptical enough to actually go and look at it, while the rest just keep on believing. And of course, these parents take these teachings that they've learned and instill it on their children, so when their children go to actual school, they sit there and they don't absorb it because they're like, nope, my mom wouldn't lie to me, or whatever.
Right. I'd like to take this opportunity to do a weekly segment that we always do, and I was going to do it earlier, but we were having such a good discussion that I put an opportunity to do as rant of the week. Now, mind you, it's not October 5th. I need to change that on the thing. You guys will understand. Anyway, the reason I chose to do this now is because we've been spending the last couple of minutes pointing out the flaws in Genesis and some of the problems, and as a comparison to the scientific community. And what really bugs me about this whole thing is absolutely the difference between acceptance and critical thought. So what I want to do my rant of the week on, and I'll try to keep it brief, is between blind faith and critical thought. You see, the difference between blind faith and critical thought is that with critical thought, you have allowed your mind to explore a multitude of possibilities. When atheists say use critical thought, it's because we want you to have explored Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and secularism, and have taken at least a brief dive into all of these things before you go off radically making a claim like, I'm right. To have just studied Christianity and then say that Christianity is absolutely right because Christianity says it's absolutely right is not critical thinking. It's blind faith. And why it's blind faith is, as I've said, you have only decided to look into one thing, and without looking into anything else, you've decided up front that you're right. There's no questions to be asked. There's no doubt in your mind. You are right. That is that. And what makes me so frustrated about this concept is, very simply put, I cannot tell you the amount of times I've discussed Genesis, the events in Genesis, with people. One being my ex-girlfriend. I keep bringing her up, but she was crazy. I can't even stand it. You discuss it with these people, and they tell you that a little bit of critical thought would open your mind. Let me just say this, okay? Whenever a person of blind faith tells me to use critical thought, the discussion is over. The discussion is over there, because at that point, that person has confessed, consciously or not, that they don't understand what critical thought is, and because they don't understand what critical thought is, I cannot use any logical thoughts or arguments to tell them what I'm saying. And if that's the case, I would be wasting my times, my efforts, and everything else that I can use to this discussion on this person. It's worthless. And the critical thought processes must be discovered with an individual by themselves. No one can tell you to go think about these things. You have to be willing to do it yourself, and do it yourself on your own motivation. So if this person doesn't understand what critical thought is and they're telling me to do it, the discussion's over, because I cannot convince them to go use critical thought. They have to do it themselves. And with such mental suicide, as we mentioned earlier, as following Genesis by law, following Genesis by fact, you are inherently sacrificing your ability to commit critical thought, and in all likelihood, you will be trapped in a stasis of brainwashed thinking, of circular logic, of downright, I can't put it any simpler, but to say mental suicide. So I encourage everyone watching the show tonight, watching the show after the fact, watching future shows, watching past shows, I don't care what you're doing. The theme of the show has always been critical thought, and what that means is that you need to go out and look at the evidence for yourself. All of it, not one side. Don't just watch our show and take our word for it. Go out on yourself and look it up. Look up all the arguments. Look up all the answers to all the arguments, and come to the conclusions yourself. I will give all the credit in the world to Christians or Islamists, or that's not the right word, but the point is anyone of faith who has gone out and looked up other religions and secularism and still identifies with that religion, because at least they tried to look at other sides. At least they went out and gave themselves the tools to possibly come to a different conclusion. I'll at least give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you're going to make an argument that is based in this without having thought about it beforehand, save everyone the trouble and just don't do it. And so that is my rant of the week for this week, and I hope you all enjoyed that.
Very good.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Got to start slow cap at every opportunity.
Oh, you know how it is.
Indeed.
So, closing in on the end of the show, we got 3 minutes, and I want to give the panel an opportunity to give their final thoughts, because I know we talked about a lot of stuff. So, I gave mine. I'm done. We'll start with Brandon, and we'll go to Michael. So, Brandon, give us a final thought, having been our reader for the evening, which I appreciate.
Reader, well, tonight left a nasty taste in my mouth, everybody. Red had to read that out loud. Nasty taste in my brain, too. No. I guess final thought I have to say is, right off the bat, very first sentence, Mike pointed out, bullshit. So on and so forth. We just kept finding more and more, and that's just in the first 2 chapters alone. I think that's, what, 2 pages, I believe, in just Genesis, if I remember correctly, depending on if you get the large print or whatever. It's about 2 pages right there, and we just found so many holes just in that alone.
Right.
To go with the end of Jeremiah's rant, if you actually looked at things and critically thought about the different religions, you would see every argument made for Christianity is practically the same as every argument made for Islam and whatnot. Same for Buddhism, same for pretty much every religion out there. They have the same apologetics. They just use their God in place of the other God, whatever. Everybody has their miracles. Everybody has this and that. If you looked at it critically, you would see this, and you would see that in this, unless there's something special about another religion, which I can guarantee you there really isn't, unless it makes you feel good and the butterflies in your stomach feel great inside, there's not going to be anything special about any religion or any God from any religion. And in the end, the choice should be clear that more than likely none of them are right at all. End of mine.
All right, let's go over to Dio. Dio, any final thoughts for the episode tonight?
Yeah, just sort of my take was very similar to your rant, that this critical thinking, or the lack of it, is very frustrating. That people will, you used the term earlier, just the willful ignorance, that they would bend their entire thinking around, that all of the evidence, you have to cram all of this history into 6,000 years old, and I find it intellectually dishonest, and I find it, as a human being, I just find it really frustrating that people would do this to themselves. It was actually the motivation that this whole creationist agenda in public schools in the U.S. is actually what motivated me to write my book in the first place. So yeah, I totally agree with your rant. I think that people who take this literally, I don't think there's any hope for them. He said, just don't even bother trying. So that's my final say.
Yeah. All right, and how about our good friend Michael? Final thought for the day.
Okay, final thought. Let me think. All right. Creationism isn't an academic alternative to evolution. It's a sideshow. That's all.
Fair enough. And I agree completely. If you want to hear more about the creationist versus evolutionist debate, evolutionist is not a word. I apologize for using that. If you want to hear more about the creation versus evolution debate, we do have a previous episode about creationism in schools. I encourage you to go check that out. And once again, talkorigins.com is a great source. If you want to dwell into creationist arguments in favor of them, there is always answers in Genesis, although don't type that into your browser if you enjoy the desk that you own not being full of head prints. So that's my advice onto you. But with that, folks, with that in mind, we are out of time. And it is great. I am so glad the panel was able to join us tonight, because I thought we had a phenomenal show tonight, guys. Thank you very much to Brandon from No God, No Peace, No God, No Peace, Dio Mayberry for his book and his contributions, and, of course, Michael Sherlock for his book and his pages and contributions as well. I want to just make the announcements that we made at the beginning of the show real quick again. We want to encourage you to go to the Mind of an Atheist Facebook page and give that a like, because we post a lot of information over there, including stuff that we've talked about on the shows. I also want to encourage everyone to go to the subreddit, which is new, www.reddit.com/r/mindofanatheist, one word, / and you can find the Mind of an Atheist subreddit, where we post the videos, the shows, and some other stuff along the way. Once again, we are also looking for new members of the panel to join up, because we have had, not in a bad way, but we've had a lot of repeat guests lately, and I want to see if we can't get some new blood in there. So if you think you would make a good member of the Mind of an Atheist crew, go to the Mind of an Atheist Facebook page, send a message to the page including your name, any previous experience you have, and why you think you'd make a good panel member. Previous experience is not required, but it is smiled upon. Once again, we want to thank everybody who commented. I had a problem with my comment feed. I wasn't able to see it, but I know if at least Eliza, a friend of the show, was able to comment. I want to thank everybody else who did comment. Because I did not get to see them, I will go back through and read them myself and reply to them personally, because that's the least I can do. We've been doing this thing for a couple of weeks now, the Atheist Song of the Week. This week I'm actually going to go to one of my favorite bands. If I don't always do that anyway, we're going to go to one of my favorite bands, Deftones. The song is Beware, off the album Saturday Night Wrist. So if you haven't heard that before, it should be in the Mind playlist sooner than later. And I'm also going to go through that playlist and go through the previous episodes and make sure that it's all lined up, because that's important. So Mind of an Atheist Song of the Week is Beware by Deftones, off the album Saturday Night Wrist. I can't think of anything else other than, once again, I want to thank everybody who commented, everybody who participated. There will be a part 2 of this, because we didn't get into everything, obviously. The next episode will probably be more specific on the specific stories, things like the story of Abraham and the Great Flood, because those are very important. So, and I hope everybody enjoyed themselves and is looking forward to part 2. So with that, guys, I don't have anything else to say, and my throat hurts. So I want to thank Brandon, Dio, and Michael. I hope to see you guys soon, and I hope to see everyone next week on another edition of The Mind of an Atheist. Thanks for watching. Have a safe night, and enjoy your heresy.